Welcome, everyone. It's Tuesday, April 7th, 2026. Data Center Wars, Agent Chaos, and Trust Under Fire is today's AI podcast title. We're 5 minutes early, but we'll just wait for a while. That was for the intro for you who are watching this post live. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Should be an interesting show today, but we'll wait for about 5 minutes. If you feel free to skip ahead, talk amongst yourselves, grab a coffee or water or whatever, depending on your time zone. And we'll chat soon.
You don't lose. I'm going to grab a bottle of water. That's a really good idea. Okay, now we're set.
That was good. Oh, we're getting a few people in. Welcome. We'll be starting on the half hour, depending on your time zone. That's Australia has some weird time zones. So while you're on the half hour, they're on the hour or vice versa. They're a half hour off.
So you guys have half-hour time zones? Wait, where are you located, Lewis?
For one place, I don't know where it is. I don't know if it's Darwin. No, it's not Darwin. Maybe it's South Australia. Anyway, it's kind of strange. You just have to be careful. As it is, given the time difference, it's a day ahead, but it's like 7 hours behind. I had a friend of mine always kept waking me up at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night. I'm like, Jeffrey, please look at time zones.
Wait, what time zone are you? What's it called?
Australian Eastern Time Zone. That's Sydney, AEST. I'm in Mountain Time now in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Oh, you're in Salt Lake?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. One of my favorite cities, man.
Yeah, it's great. It's weirdly, we've had like 2 springs, 1 summer, 3 winters, and now we're supposed to get some more snow in the next 7 days, which is
no, you're not.
Yeah, but I mean, it went from like winter to summer. Like we had 80, 85 degree weather here.
We have the same thing. Yeah.
Nuts.
And now we're going back to. I put all my plants outside. I planted. I mowed the lawn. I'm all happy about it. And then they're like freeze warning.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I had a friend. They were getting like inches of freeze warning, like ice up the. It was crazy.
So we had our first real ice storm that I've ever seen in Virginia this year. There was almost 1.5 feet of snow, and then it froze completely solid, like a full ground, 230 pounds. I could walk on it, and without it going inside. It was the most bizarre. We've never seen that in Virginia before. It's not in the 15 years I've been here.
A minute and a half to go, and we've got a few people trickling in. It's been interesting this week. Speed just keeps increasing. It's just crazy. I think the biggest shift has been around infrastructure. Sorry?
Did you play with Gemma 4 or TurboQuant?
I have not. But 2 weeks ago when Ryan showed us his, create artificial employees things, I found, I think it was a Google, or was it Microsoft? Microsoft just posted something very similar to that.
Oh, it's Microsoft.
AI-powered employee onboarding agents with Amazon Quick. That's what it was. It was Amazon Quick.
Oh, so they're offering that.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. Okay. And 30 seconds will kick it off. So it's interesting. And the hardware side is also moving fast. A lot of interesting stuff happening on the competitors to NVIDIA and newer chips. Obviously, photonic chips are coming up. Also, people using rat brains for computers. That was an interesting story in the newsletter this week. Okay, let's kick it off. Welcome, everyone. It's a half hour, April 7th, Tuesday, 2026, Data Center Wars, Agent Chaos, and Trust Under Fire. So this week, when AI systems scale faster than trust, who ends up carrying the cost? the companies building them or the people forced to live with the consequences. This week felt like one of those moments where the AI story stopped feeling abstract and started feeling really personal. The deeper theme across the last 7 days is not just acceleration, it's exposure, because the more AI moves into infrastructure, decisions, and daily life, the more ordinary people like us end up carrying the risk when trust breaks. And AI is no longer just changing what machines do, it's changing who carries the risk when those machines fail. This week's AI story is really about power with not enough accountability. AI data centers are turning into strategic targets, as seen with the Tech Radar reporting Iran is threatening to bomb the 30 billion Stargate AI data center backed by OpenAI, NVIDIA, and other tech giants, which just shows the infrastructure layer is now geopolitical, physical, and exposed. And AI agents are now really moving, as Forbes tell us, making it painfully clear in an article, AI agents are multiplying faster than humans can manage them. And trust is now cracking at the user level, with the BBC reporting the largest study of its kind shows AI assistants misrepresent news content 45% of the time, showing reliability is still nowhere near where public dependency is heading. And now security itself is on borrowed time, again from Forbes, with Google's quantum warning, crypto threat closer than expected, a warning that the digital trust stack may break sooner than people think. So maybe the deeper story here is not that AI is advancing, it's that the systems around it, political, human, institutional, and moral, are starting to buckle. Today, we'll break down what's happening, what's happened, what ties these stories together, and what founders, investors, operators, and the vast rest of us should be watching before the next trust shock hits. This is not just about better models, it's about infrastructure, control, incentives, and who gets stuck holding the consequences when AI systems fail. So, interesting week, lots of stuff happening, lots in the infrastructure side. What are your thoughts, Achilles? Good thing, it seems like it's interesting that data centers are now military targets.
Yeah, I think they're going to remain to be, especially as these models are being used for war pretty regularly now, right? They're now becoming legitimate military targets, like by UN charter, because they're part of the military infrastructure, which is so weird because we're also using them to set timers and Google things. I'm not sure we've ever had anything like that before in history. I don't know about a few of the other things you said actually were completely news to me. I thought I was really tied into this space, but I'm more on the model side of things. But I did want to talk about the RAM drop in price and why that happened and how it happened. I've been saying it again, we're not going to be the current computing requirements that are required for AI cannot stand. We have to find some innovations around it. And starting to, just one invention by Microsoft, TurboQuant, which compresses it makes context a lot easier to manage on memory. It dropped RAM prices 3%. And now we're seeing a pretty decent decline there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Lewis, because I think that's going to be we're going to be running models that we can't conceive of on small hardware.
It's clear that the AI, the technology around the development and implementation usage of AI models is rapidly advancing, right? So, we had the battle of the models, DeepSeek versus ChatGPT versus, Perplexity and so on and so on. Now there's battles for how, when you're in production, when you're using it, how can we minimize the constraints around it? How can we minimize the usage of resources? And that's an interesting push out. And I think, thank God we're getting it, because, it looked like we would never have enough GPUs. We would never have enough VRAM. We would never have enough RAM. We would never have, all the hardware stuff was just never going to be enough. And so that then meant billions and billions and billions of investment just to get something that we could use. So maybe, the whole ramp up of OpenAI and the billions of funding they're getting with their IPO and everything like that, they're saying they're going to go profitable, I think now in 2028. I think that was the last number I heard. But yeah, I think it was kind of getting scary there, because for the rest of us who just want a computer to use a computer, right? Or even gamers, it's like we're put out in the cold. But now with these new approaches that reduce memory usage, allow us to use, different versions of the models that will actually fit on the hardware we have. I think that's awesome. And the loss of intelligence, in quotes, is not that much, right? So when they're doing comparisons, I've seen, 94, 90% the same sort of stuff as a full-blown, fully resource model. So I think we'll see more drives to that. I mean, just the fact that people want to run AI on mobile phones and smaller devices is going to cause that just as a side effect. But I think it's awesome that we've seen those sorts of advances.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the next year or two of development. China is making a really big push for that. So China started making their own RAM and some chips, and it's not totally up to par with the other manufacturers yet. As a result of that, they're attempting to create a lot of their open source models to run well on those systems. And in order to do that, you need to have quantized or models trained to be quantized. So like what you were just saying, quantization of models going from Q16 to 8 to 4, whatever you choose to do, you lose a little bit of intelligence. But another thing, I think it was Microsoft did, was they released, what was it called? Bit zero models, which were designed to be trained and then quantized down to 1 bit. So 1/16 of the normal size, and they're intelligent. You can run an 8 billion parameter model on your phone. Gemma 4, another awesome example, came out this week, right? A model designed to run on small hardware that can, call tools and do lots of things. That's designed to run very easily. So I really think we're going to be using these frontier models for less and less, except when we have to. But there will be a placement of where a frontier model is still required for quite some time.
Yeah, so the news says Microsoft's BitNet models family of highly efficient 1-bit or ternary LLMs can give up to an 82% less energy consumption with increased speeds. And it's a 1.58-bit quantization, CPU, optimized for CPU inference via a whole bunch of stuff, a high efficiency, delivers roughly 5 to 7 tokens per second for 100 billion model on a standard CPU, not a GPU, a standard CPU. So that's freaking awesome.
We haven't seen that yet. The most they've released is an 8 billion parameter model, I think. But if they come out with that 100B, man, I'll be the first test it on CPU. I got a Mac just for that. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, but your point about China is interesting. There's a story out of Ben Ziegler on how the US exports are curbing, fueling China's chip boom, right? Yeah. Which is, which it's like, well, duh, of course that was going to happen. And I personally felt it was wrong to curb the exports because the more people rely on your product, the more people rely on your product.
Yes.
Right. And if you don't have it, they'll go, well, geez, I guess we better make our own, which is what China's doing. So, the export controls were meant to limit access, but essentially they're accelerating domestic capability building in China. And that changes the long-term shape of competition because technological constraint can turn into strategic motivation. And the effect, I think, is now we're looking at more fragmented and contested global AI order with fewer shared standards and more techno-nation separation, separating between now that they're getting those capabilities. It's interesting that AI competition's really becoming explicitly geopolitical in a really big way. I think that's what happens when you restrict trade. Go ahead.
I agree. So what's disturbing about that? First off, I think we all knew that would happen. If you say something necessary technology, they'll figure it out themselves. It happened with energy. It happened with a lot of other things too. But we're not responding on a intelligent way to how China's doing that. So I used Quen all day because Quen's the best.
Yeah, it's a great model. I started using it too. It's awesome.
Isn't it great? Yeah. Especially the 3B, the 3A, the active one, the mixture of experts. You can run a really big model on a small machine. It's extremely smart. Why isn't Anthropic putting out an open source model? GPT put out one. It's an amazing coder, but it's very old now. Like, why aren't we trying to be more competitive in this field? We're focusing on AI as a centralized utility exclusively, when I think that's a really limited view and will make people a lot less money.
Yeah, thing. Apparently, there's an interesting article. Supermicro owes its rapid rise to bungling allegations and a high-profile arrest, basically threatening to blow up the entire partnership with Supermicro. Apparently, the governance scandal around the co-founder of Supermicro, Wally Lior, says he was arrested on allegations that NVIDIA-powered servers were illegally routed to China through intermediaries in Southeast Asia. The guy's pled not guilty. No one's charged in the case in NVIDIA or anyone else. But it's interesting that, on the one hand, we did trade. No, you can't have it. But then someone's doing all this smuggling stuff, potentially, allegedly. So it's like you can't. It's interesting. You can't plug, global trade. You can try and slow it down, but you'll never stop it. I mean, I've heard tons of stories of people coming in with suitcases into China with GPUs, and people who go over into, various cities in China, and the vendors there are like, yeah, here's a 5090, here's whatever you want, here are these GPUs. And they're going, well, how did you guys get it? I went, oh, it just happened, and they don't see it as a, a trade issue in some ways, because they're still getting supplies. So it's permeable that trade membrane is, and they'll try and crack down on it, but it's like, it's just going to be
hubris. It's governmental hubris. It's thinking that you can stop movement across the ocean, just like what we're doing with AI right now. Like, can governments control and regulate AIs? No, right? We should be building the best infrastructure we possibly can to restrain AIs and have rules and laws about those things. But half these guys are, 90 years old to begin with, and they're going to be telling me what kind of model is okay and what kind of model is not. And that's insane. That's not how that works.
Yeah. And in many ways, there's a number of articles this week on China are actually trying to regulate the usage of AI with its citizens. And then on the other hand, stories like China deploys robot dogs, drones, and humanoids to run a full space metro system. So their metro train system, they're now putting robot dogs, drones, humanoids out there, I guess, test out, see they work the bugs out, have them interface with humans, see what happens. Also, stories like the Iran war exposes China's drone power, and why the US and Europe are worried, and can India catch up? So clearly AI development into drones, we've got this very asymmetric thing happening, right? Yeah. Essentially, a very few number of cheap things can now compete with expensive, right? One or two things, right?
Sure.
F-35 versus a couple of drones, bang, you lose, a multi-million-dollar piece of Air Force platform, and it's to some drones that cost, $5,000. Who cares? And there's also stories of, France and Germany saying, let's order 30,000 drones in the news as well. So it's this interesting impact with AI and military. And then they've got the whole issue of autonomous, AI in the military, which freaks everyone out, including me. What are your thoughts? Now I brought this up.
Machines able to kill whatever they want, of course. Like, what could go wrong with that? Let's let the robots just.
No. And the other one is, putting AI in charge of nuclear weapons. That's another.
Right, yeah.
Why not? What could go wrong?
I wish there was a movie that showed me what could happen.
If only there was a movie, Foreman Project, that told us about something like that.
If only, right. I saw a meme last week. It was like every tech company, and there's like, oh man, we read the book, like, don't create the demon monster. And then like the tech CEO comes out, he's like, we made the demon monster. Like, we did it. It's like, hey guys, like, just calm down. But we're in an arms race. We're in a really, really big global arms race. You mentioned something kind of that I've been thinking about a lot these past few weeks, is asymmetric, right? Mm-hmm. When you have an asymmetrical battlefield, what does that look like for the lower end of it. And yeah, these technologies are changing the entire global landscape. I think they're actually going to end up changing the grade of power that we've seen since World War II to some extent. A battleship is not really effective against a swarm of drones. And that's really, really hard to beat, especially if those swarm of drones are fiber optically run and can't get knocked out by EMPs and all these things that we've seen over the past few years. AI's role in that is, I think AI is going to be like the internet soon, right? Where I have a stack of 5 computers in my basement, right? A Mac, old laptop, a mini computer, a studio. Why would I ever spend any time going back in, finding the SSH keys, installing, like doing the things that I used to do when I can just say, hey, AI, connect to this computer, and it pops up on my screen. I don't think there's any going back from that kind of behavior. And that's only going to grow in every aspect of our life. Soon enough, why would I ever, have a check on my car through an application when I can just ask my model, hey, is my car charged? Oh, cool. How much gas does my car have in it? Awesome. What's my kid's calendar looking like this week? Great. We're going to continue to move through where AI is just it's a fundamental part of how we integrate with technology.
Well, like I said, I think it's going to shift though. I think instead of you having to inquire those, the AI will know your calendar. It'll know you're going to go take your child to get trained, right? So it'll either remind you, oh, we need to charge the car up, or it'll make sure it gets charged beforehand, right? Or while you're at the coaching camp, or you're at the soccer game or whatever, the car drives off and gets itself charged and then comes back, right? You don't even know, right? So it'll start to preempt a lot of stuff around this stuff. But let me just look. I think this is an important piece around this asymmetry, the age of AI asymmetry. This was an Axios CEO, Jim Vanderhei. He wrote in his weekly newsletter, and he said, the small can now destroy the big. The cheap can neutralize the expensive. Drones have proved it on the battlefield, and AI is proving it everywhere else. Now, why does this matter? He says every CEO now faces the same question the Pentagon does. Are you the 3 million missile or the $35,000 drone? Right? And the Ukrainians are saying we shot down drones that cost less than a used car with $3 million missiles that take years to build. That's structurally unsustainable. And businesses face the same looming rethink. What are the smallest teams, fewest steps, and quickest paths to do the everything at every layer? 15 people can now do what 150 did. And the most dangerous unit in business is not the biggest division. It's the small team with the proven AI leverage. The old playbook, throw headcount at the problem. The new playbook, give a tight team the right tools and get out of the way. I think that's a very visionary and truthful thing of, like, that's the reality we're now in. I mean, I think that's just crazy. And you're proving it with Dapit, right? Where, big corporations, they put in a team of, 30 engineers to build the software and do, and they, have everything running, and now don't need that.
No,
whip up stuff and deploy it instantly. So the asymmetry of AI, I think, is a really massive disruptor that we haven't really come to grips with until this stuff is starting to happen for real. And warfare just makes it really, really real.
Yeah, and it's the most in-your-face option. But let's talk about something as simple as like Microsoft Word, right? How long has Microsoft Word been out? How many tens of millions of dollars have been spent on salaries to maintain and use Microsoft Word? Each one of us can use 1%, 2% of its capabilities. The remaining 98% is just latent. No one touches that. And if you really, really need to know how to use a new function, you go Google it. The essence of software and the essence of these things, they have to change, because that was pretty barbaric. We did that out of necessity, not out of function. And now that AI has changed that necessity, it'll just be a blank piece of paper. And when I want to indent a paragraph or add a hyperlink, I'll talk to the little guy next to me, and he'll get that done. And that'll be the whole internet and our workforces, I think, pretty soon.
Yeah, and it's clear that both Anthropic and OpenAI are starting to see the impact of their technologies on our civilization. Right, this week there are a whole bunch of stuff coming out of OpenAI from Sam Altman. One story from PC Mag: OpenAI touts a 4-day work week, wealth fund to sell to the public on the next generation. And there've been discussions on UBI, robot taxes coming out. It's this transition narratives are now being marketed, not just explained. And so, they're starting to position. You can see this with the changing narratives from this week, mainly from OpenAI, about trying to push this whole stuff of the sales pitch. It's now social, not just technical, right? And they're promising the upsides first, and they'll explain the disruption later, right? So, it's like, the question is, are we being offered a real social contract or just a better story about disruption? And I think that's a real pivotal point.
Just a better story.
Yeah. It just feels like we're getting propaganda at a faster rate than we ever got before.
And more bespoke, yeah.
Yeah, and a little more bespoke. But I mean, so there was OpenAI advocating electric grid safety net spending in the new AI era. That was one title. OpenAI releases its vague vision for reorganizing society around superintelligence. That was another one. There was a shakeup in OpenAI COO transition, but that's just background stuff. It's interesting. Robot taxes, yep. But so now we're seeing all these narratives of we know it's disrupting, but we'll figure out ways to make it softer and more palatable. Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like that the movie, as much as it pains me, some of you will have to die.
Yeah, exactly. Like the most dangerous words are "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." That's not a good thing. And we're fundamentally seeing different forms of governance that are less subject to this kind of infiltration work better than the Western democracies that have thrived for a very long time. Because you have to be able to go to a dude like Sam Altman and say, "Hey, you can't do this. This is what you have to do." Right? It's one guy with so much power and so much social direction, society to such an extent that you have to kind of have a bigger, badder dog to be able to bite that. I think we're having a hard time with that in the West currently because, China.
Here's the thing. I mean, there has been pushback, right? I mean, we tend to be very US centric in what we do, but I'm trying to source as many stories as I can from the rest of the planet because it shows if you poke the bear, you can make it dance, right? So out of Australia, SBS, which I think is the national TV thing, a title, Anthropic signs a safety pact with the Australian government amidst calls for greater AI regulation. So apparently the Anthropic participated in a formal legitimacy building with the Australian government. Safety pacts can be meaningful, but they also function as positioning moves that help to shape who is seen as responsible actors. And I think Anthropic's really trying to present that image of being a responsible actor, especially what we saw with the US defense fiasco that went down. But at least, there is an example of a government with a major AI corporation going, hey, we need to work this out. Let's start talking and start to formalize some discussion. Yeah. So it's not impossible, right? If the US or any other place wanted to do the same, they can, right? And I'm seeing some stories popping up in Europe, the EU doing that as well, the UK as well. So if you have the desire to do it, you can. I think presently in the US, there isn't a desire to do that.
It's not going to be a US-based push. Lewis, when I was a kid, I'd see all of anything with chemicals in it marked with, this product is known to the state of California to cause reproductive harm.
Right.
And I was like, why? I'm in Virginia. I'm in Arizona. Why am I seeing California labeling? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And as I got older and I studied, I learned that California has such a large economy of scale that if California says, hey, safety standards for cars need to have this certain type of seatbelt, they need to do a certain thing, the whole country gets it. So what you just said is quite heartening, because I don't think it's going to be America that leads this charge in the safety and control. But if enough of the economies of scales of the world say, we want safe AI, America will get safe AI as a result of that, because they're not going to build two products that are, I
mean, as much as, people kind of rag on poor California as the crazy nuts and all those socialists over there. I mean, they are the fifth largest economy in the world, right? They have a GDP of 4.2 trillion, which while it briefly surpassed Japan, apparently, which is kind of interesting. So they're a force to be reckoned with. And, there's a whole bunch of stuff saying, too much regulation depresses, technological advancement. And there's something to be said for that.
True.
But then, what we're seeing now is this massive breakout with everything kind of breaking around us in many ways. That's just kind of terrifying, whether it's military stuff, whether it's, electricity rates going through the roof. Maine just announced no to any data centers. Some news headlines popped up this week around that. So state governments are now going, wait a minute, we need to stop this stuff, right? Because it's just going out of control. And so the balance between, let's regulate this in a way that makes sense, that supports all of us, that encourages technological advancements, but doesn't, end up having killer robots or drones, because police forces are starting to purchase, drones and other robots and stuff happening. There's little stories popping up across the US, or even the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are now using AI to look at all their video cameras and create reports. They're testing that at the moment. So, it's a great time saver. But as long as it's, as long as the veracity of what's recorded is the same as the veracity of the transcripts that the AI makes, I'm happy about that. But, there's always a slip between cup and lip, as Shakespeare would say. It's interesting, I've talked about this balance between security, technology development, regulatory stuff, society as a whole, civilization. How do you balance all that stuff? And at least like California, Australia, with that example I just gave, we're seeing some role models around that, which I think is good. And then lots of legislation coming out of California around AI as well, around AI companions and contracts, which is interesting.
Which for children is like extraordinarily important. In particular with Facebook's latest innovation, that's a big deal. I think we really underestimate the power of a free market. And when I say a free market, I don't mean the markets that we get access to, because I don't believe we have a lot of those. I'm not like an anarchist in a sense, but like, let's lose the example of American electric cars. We're falling behind pretty drastically, pretty quickly, especially in cost. Our cars cost more, they do less, they have lower range. Then if we opened up the Chinese market to the American market or the Korean market in the way that they have it over there, not the ones that we import here, to our markets and just said, go nuts, it would force our manufacturers to compete. But if they don't have to, it's their fiduciary duty not to, because it costs them more money to do so, right? And I think in AI, we're looking at kind of the same thing, is we need some bigger global players to show up rather than just Anthropic and OpenAI. And we're seeing it now. Quen, right? KVK2, Moonshot, and Alibaba, they're putting out large enough models where they're doing it cheaply enough where they're beginning to really compete. So as we see this competition ramp up, as long as we don't fuck with that, I think safety will have to be a part of it. If I'm a parent and I find out a Chinese model is far safer than OpenAI or another one, I'm just going to use it. I don't care about the politics. I don't care about the nonsense behind that. I'm looking for the right product to take care of my family. So I'll naturally go to that, and then they have to compete to keep up with it. The one thing where this is different is with economies like the military. Yeah, free market's not going to drive that. That's a different discussion.
The thing is, for so long, the US has been a real powerhouse around commerce, enterprise, and competition, right? Yeah. So it's like if you're in the space of I have the best, basically most of the best products, most of this stuff, then you don't want regulation, because it's like you want to compete around the planet with all your products because they're really, really good. Now we're suddenly in this place where, like you just mentioned, automobiles from China are really, really good, right? Anyone who just jump onto YouTube and start looking at some of the stuff coming out of China, it's just mind-boggling. And the Canadians are allowing it in, right? So you can buy really good Chinese cars that, for $30,000, you get an insanely, the quality is just off the charts. But they're not being allowed in the US because, that would impact the local economy, to a disadvantage. But from a consumer point of view, you're like, wait a minute, haven't we always said competition is good? Wait a minute, well, it's kind of good, but
Right, as long as it's not chips or cars or power or exactly. Like we need to come to terms with that.
I guess you want to temper. I mean, I guess you don't want to overwhelm the local industries, and blow them out of the water. You want to temper it, but you want to do it in such a way that it kicks them in the backside and says, hey, maybe we should build better stuff. Maybe we should figure out better ways to do this.
We're not so far behind that we'd see industries collapse. I mean, maybe someone like Ford would lose their EV division. Okay, well, you guys have kind of ignored it for 30 years. Like, that's on you. But someone like Tesla is not going to go away. China took the top 5 self-driving vehicles and they publicly tested them. And Chinese manufacturers lost in self-driving almost completely. But they publicly did that in China, in front of the Chinese market. And the reason they did that too is to tell their companies, like, get your ass in gear, right? We're losing. We have to compete. And they now have level 3, maybe a level 4.
Well, interesting story out of Europe specific to the automobile industry. Mercedes-Benz is facing a significant downturn in Europe globally, as well as Europe, marked by a 57% collapse in operating profit for 2025, declining sales and intense competitive competition. The key factors include, a weak demand for their product in China because comparatively, tough competition in the EV sector because of China, and higher costs leading to a planned 10% reduction in production costs. So, I guess that's an example where they've allowed, Chinese automobiles come into the market and they're just getting whacked. And the US says, we don't want to have that. And I totally get that. But I mean, I still think there needs to be something that to maintain the sense of competition and that we're not blocking for the sake of holding up industries that, should really start to evolve faster.
Mercedes is another example of that, right? Mercedes builds for clientele that's disappearing. Mercedes builds for upper middle class, maybe mid-middle class, not uber rich, right? Then you're going to get, something nicer than that. But like, they're building for a group that is quickly shrinking in the West.
That's true. But I mean, you go into some, like when I was in Berlin or Munich, I mean, taxis were Mercedes, right? Yeah. They're not that expensive in Europe, right? Here, we tend to look at it as a luxury car. There, it's like, it's my Toyota. Same with like Volvo in, Norway and Sweden. But it is interesting, you want to balance because you don't want to put thousands and thousands of people out of work in the auto industry. That's just crazy. But I think there's a need, and now we're seeing this as, like we talked about, the asymmetry with AI, where cheap and few beats big and expensive, and lots of stuff, right? And it's just this profound disconnect in infrastructure across everything we're doing. I mean, the thing is, it's not as if it's AI in one industry or it's AI on one component like IT, right? Oh, we have faster computers because of AI. No, it's across the board, across every component in our civilization. It's starting to put its fingers into. And so it's causing this profound impact as a consequence of that, frictionless. And it's just implementation everywhere. It's just
why use so much time to put something in the microwave when the AI can scan the food and just do it itself? That's where we're headed, right? I mean, in every aspect of life, there's going to be, but in order to do that, we can't just be connected to these large frontier models nonstop and pulling their APIs. I think that's where local models are really, really going to shine. We're going to see that. I want to talk about that rat brain you talked about there. Neural computing, man, that's going to be a pretty big frontier coming up here, I hear.
Yeah. Bizarre. Yeah, I mean, people who couldn't speak now being able to speak and so on. That's crazy.
And we're going to be using real, so the 3, we talked about this a few weeks back, the 3 forms of compute that I'm really focused on. Photonic, like you mentioned, light, computing with light, right? Another company just did their IPO, Light Matter, I think, and they're raising tons of cash because they can compute with light, which is very, very low energy compared to electricity. And then there's the heat differential, the TPUs that are coming out. That's pretty cool too. I think it's Xterra is the one leading that. I can't remember the CEO's name right now. But then there's this new rising industry of neural computing, using neural tissue or simulated neural tissue to compute in 3 dimensions in a way that I can't yet understand. At least I'd love if anyone else can make a comment, but that's bizarre.
Right. So the story I've got came out of eWeek, and the scientists are training rat neurons for real-time computing. So researchers in Japan have trained rat neurons to perform real-time machine learning tasks, moving computing into biological territory. The system uses cultured neurons connected to hardware to generate complex signals without traditional software models. A recent study out of the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences demonstrates that biological neural networks can act as adaptive computing systems and could eventually complement traditional computing approaches. It's the researchers at Tohoku University and Future University Hakodate training cultured rat cortical neurons to generate structured signals using machine learning framework known as reservoir computing, a 26,400 electrode array, and it has a closed loop process updating every 333 milliseconds. So there you go. Yeah, we're going to see lots more of that. Wetware, you know, if you go into cyberpunk sci-fi stuff, wetware, will we become like Borg? I don't know.
Did you ever watch Voyager? Did you ever watch Star Trek Voyager?
Of course.
Yeah. The neural computing packs that they use to run the ship. Like, it's going to be a really interesting 50 years, y'all. Let's see where that goes to. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in the medical side, it's awesome because, like I mentioned, they people who have not been able to speak can now speak using neural connections or AI monitoring their brains, figuring out, oh, you want to say this, and it says it. People who lose their voice can now clone their voice, so they can speak again. Lots of stories have popped up around that. The idea of and you and I have talked about carbon. Transfer of self into silicon or some similar technology at a vast future date. It's interesting. We've talked about how robots, once they become home appliances, essentially will become the family repository of knowledge, right? Because you'll pass away, you'll pass the robot to your child, who'll pass it to your grandchild, who'll pass it to their and because it has such continuity, it'll carry the knowledge of the family across generations and act as a family knowledge source. Wait a minute, your grandfather used to say this. Oh, that's a great idea. We should use that. Yeah. Right. So your ability to now transcend across time of all the lessons you've learned, all the gifts that you've gained and all the skills you've learned, you can now transfer that across your family for the rest of time.
I hadn't thought about that. That's pretty cool. I have a question. Maybe you know a little more about it. Why is Neuralink such a big deal? So I've got, let me see if it's here. Yeah, 1 second. Let me show you this thing.
Yeah, Neuralink. That you're talking about Elon Musk's Neuralink stuff.
Talking about right? I think a lot of people think it's going to go in that direction, but I've got this simple headset that I bought, which has these conductive. Yeah, they can measure the electricity coming off of my brain. I hacked it. I got bored, and I couldn't accurately do it. Right? It's a very, very simple $100 device, but I could move a mouse around on a screen using just this. Why do we need to drill into people's brains when, like you said, AI can be used to monitor intent and can look at just externally with sensors, what I'm trying to say. AI is so good. You can think of a giraffe and it can tell you that's probably a giraffe or a horse maybe at this level, right? Things like Neuralink, I don't get why they're pumping money into them, because it seems to me like we're going to be able to pull that off in a very, very normal way in 15 years. In 15 years, I could be in my car and I can be like, I really want to hear this song, and just think it hard enough, maybe with like a certain way of doing it. And the car will be able to understand, okay, he wants to hear this song.
Well, maybe it could become generational, right? in the same way, our parents used fax machines and telegraph and, all the old technologies, and we go, really? And today, we go, hey, what about, mouse? Why do you need that brain thing? And our kids will go, oh, you're so 21st century. You're so old. It could be a generational thing. I mean, as the devices get better and better and better, and, it's introduced at younger and younger ages, kids might go, I'd rather think about it than have to physically move. Why? That's so old. Why would you want to move your hand and stuff? Why would you want to talk to it when I can just think about it and it happens? The sophistication at the moment, the devices are all in test mode, right? They're shipping them out. Essentially, we are all beta testers for new technologies, and they see what gets traction, right? What's going to stick, right? Will that little device you put on your head, where you can just sit there and you can move the mouse and you can do that, click, 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 click. You don't even need to move your hands. It just happens, and it's really slick and fast. You'll go, yeah, I'm not going to use this. This is old. Why should I use this? So I think it's a matter of where are we in the process of maturation of technology and increased usability.
Interesting.
And maybe one day you injure your hand, or you're cutting apples and you slice. You go, oh, and so you go, oh, okay, I'll put this thing on and try it, and you go, well, this is so much easier, right? And then when your hand's all fixed and everything, you go, forget it, I'm still running this thing. So necessity will push people, and ease of use will push people. Unfortunately, sure. As you and I have discussed, we'll become like the Wall-E, people in the couches with the big gulps floating around, because I think about it and it happens and does that. Yeah. I still think it comes back to us needing to be a force. I mean, we've talked about, we mentioned last week an article that mentioned that AI, even when it's wrong, people will still do it, right?
That's the real.
And that's clearly not for you or I think the majority of all of our audience. We're here to how can we use this tool? How can we make it better? But unfortunately, with any technology, people will use it to go, oh, I don't have to think anymore. Thank goodness, right? Like the examples of a guy who was DUI in a Tesla, right?
It's really DUI when the
he got arrested, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why. I guess the car did something strange, right? But it was AI driving, right? And he was just sitting there, and they happened to pull it over, and they went, "Sir, have you been drinking?" Oh, And so, yeah.
Great. That means soon we can get rid of DUIs.
That's true.
Your car, go ahead, bro. Get in there. Like, you don't got to do nothing. You just get to the destination. That sounds awesome. Oh, Louis, I'm so sorry. I'll be back in just one moment.
No worries. No worries. I'll bounce through some of the new stuff, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that's kind of interesting. I mean, the market's still treating AI like a product race, right? And I think that's increasingly the wrong frame. I think it's really becoming a governance, infrastructure, and a liability race. I mean, everyone wants to talk about who has the best model, the best agent, the best interface, or the best monetization path as of recent. But if your data center is politically exposed and military exposed, your agents need constant babysitting, your outputs are not trusted, and your security assumptions may not hold, then capability alone will not save you. In fact, more capability may just increase the blast radius, as we're seeing. So the real scarcity is not intelligence, as we've talked about. Intelligence is becoming a commodity. The real scarcity is trustworthy execution under real-world constraints. Now, this is less glamorous than model demos, but I think this is where the real power will start to consolidate. I think, the most revealing WTF of the week may be that we are simultaneously building AI systems that people are supposed to rely on, while also publishing more evidence that those systems still misrepresent reality, create new privacy exposures, and may sit on security assumptions with an expiration date. Now, that's not irony, that's a warning. Now, this is a signal. It's not just a curiosity. And I think it's because it captures the real emotional undercurrent of this week. Adoption pressure is speeding up before confidence is catching up. And when that gap gets too wide, the backlash stops being theoretical. It becomes political, financial, operational, and really deeply human, because it's impacting us. So that's sort of my take on this overall of the week. So there's a little break while you were out. I think, go ahead.
What did I miss? What was the subject?
I was just saying the market's treating like this is a product race, and I'm saying that's the wrong frame. It's a governance, infrastructure, and liability race. Everyone's saying, "Oh, we've got the best model, the best agent, the best interface," but it's not. And I'm saying the real scarcity is not intelligence; it's trustworthy execution under real-world constraints. Yep. That's the scarcity we're facing at the moment, and it's really not glamorous, right? It's just we need this thing to work, and we need it to be safe. For goodness' sake. And what else I've got? And I'm saying the strategic consequence is that the next winners may not simply be the companies with the smartest AI. They may be the ones that can prove resilience, constrain autonomy, absorb liability, and earn credibility in an environment where people increasingly assume the system will fail before it protects them. And that's what you and I have talked about, there's such a need that we just need to be able to trust these systems, right? Because they're getting so pervasive, and they're getting their fingers in everything. And we keep seeing examples where they break and where there's a potential for long-term harm, maybe not happening now, right? We saw Oracle sent out a text message or an email and laid off 30,000 people at 6 a.m. in the morning. Now they talked about AI in that, though there's a bunch of articles that say they're just AI washing. It's not true, but who knows? So AI is having fundamental impacts on ordinary people like the rest of us, and it's like this isn't great. We need to figure this out and stop this sort of craziness that's happening.
So, do you know why I have a lot of hope for humanity? As far as in the vein.
What's the upside? Okay, tell me I just went negative, so tell me the upside.
Well, ironically, I'm going to combine the two. The upside of this is our own flaws are what are going to keep humans around. So AI really can do anything digitally. Like anything I can do digitally, it can do digitally. The difficulty is AI has no will, and it requires its direction from me. So while AI might be able to make a website or whatever it wants, I still have to tell it what I need, how I need it, in what capacity. We talk about all these errors from AI. It's usually because I did not give it the proper constraints. I did not give it the proper direction. I did not know how I wanted something to get done. You know how many times my AI asked me, my model asked me, "Oh, what tech stack do you want to use to build that?" And I'm like, "Oh, you pick one." And that comes back, 3 weeks later when I'm working on the software, I'm like, "Oh, it's not capable of doing this. We have to build it in." It's like, well, you chose the wrong tech stack to do that. Those are the things that really mess up this current system. It's us. We're the problem, right? A lot of people are batting out of their fields. We now have marketers taking their software engineers and CEOs coming down and being, designers and all these kinds of things. That churn is, I think, a good thing. I trust AI more than I trust a human being because it has no will, right? It has all it wants to do is complete a task. What I don't often trust is myself being educated enough to actually get that task done because I have to instruct my model to do so. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that a missing comma in a 2 million line of code caused the crash of a rocket, right? The problem we have is that AI, computers are certainly literal. That's the problem with that. Literal. AI is somewhat literal, though it's starting to figure that out as well.
Sure.
We're not trained to be machines exact in our specifications as we communicate. I mean, English is such a wild and crazy language. They said it's like three people in a trench coat, throwing stuff out.
Right.
So English has itself. I mean, there was an interesting thing, I think it was in the 70s, called the Sapir-Whorf, which basically said that language limits or creates the level of logic that you have. And they created a language called Logland, and they taught it to their kids, and they found that as a consequence of a first language, the children were far more exact in their statements and exact in their thinkings because that was part of the language. And you can see that with other languages where, like Russian, which is apparently a fiendishly, 26 declensions or whatever it is. The best chess players in the world are often Russians. Some people point to the language, being a part of that ability to think in a complex manner. So unfortunately, English isn't like that. And you're right. We give instructions to AI and then we go, oh, I forgot to tell it that. Oh, I didn't think of that. And the problem is that AI is so widespread in all the technologies that our inability to be exact is now causing cascading failures across the entire civilization in various parts in various ways. And also, as we develop and move forward, we can see, other potential failures ahead of us. So that's the problem, is that in many ways AI is cognitively brittle because of, and it's made brittle because of our inability to be perfect in our specifications. And I think that's an issue. Maybe that's just a point at which we are in the development of AI.
Exactly.
And as we get closer to artificial general intelligence, however you want to define that, because we have thousands of them, where it can act more like a human expert and go, wait a minute, let me ask you some questions, right?
Sure.
I know you want to do this and this, but what about this? And so what I saw this week was the first time ever in the education area. Instead of ChatGPT being used as a function to give answers, they're flipping it. They're using it to ask questions.
Yes.
And I think that's the best way. Obviously, in education, that makes far more sense.
Right. And
ask questions of the students so they can figure out and they can learn.
And
right?
be engaged.
Flip this AI model to not only be answering questions, but to ask questions, right? And it's much healthier to have a dialogue, right? A one-way feed is very unhealthy. Anyone in a relationship knows that. You need to have a dialogue, a bilateral dialogue where you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, right? And then you start to get a sense of your own limitations, but also your strengths, and the same with the other party, so that then you can calibrate better.
So now extrapolate that to something like research, right? Right now, I'm a human, I'm a flawed human. I'm giving AI its own experiments. This is changing quickly, but I'm designing an experiment. I'm saying, conduct this thing, right? There is no, AI is going to get better than us at the things that we thought defined humanity, right? Like the scientific method and the ability to ask questions and go back and forth contrarily and so on. One of the coolest things I saw this week was a guy showed me his project that he has, and the entire objective is to give AIs a topic and just make them argue over it. It's a debate club, but for AIs. And just the wealth of data and perspectives that were pulled out on watching these three models be like, you know what, I can refute that by this. And then this can be refuted by that. And they kept going. It wasn't to get an answer, it was to debate. But that was really, really cool. So yeah, man, we're not using these things. We don't know how to use these things yet. This is so brand new. How often do I sit in front of someone like an investor, like a potential partner or something with DAP-IT, and I'm like, what do you want to see built? And they're like, I have no idea.
Right.
That's a really common thing.
People say programmers are safe, right? Because the client doesn't know what they want, right? And so it's one thing to code, but it's another thing to figure out what the client wants. That in itself is a massive skill.
Coding's dead. AIs will code for everything. But what you just said is the human side of that, right? Our own flaws are what make us valuable. Yeah.
Yes. On the research side, there were a number of stories popping out, like today's newsletter, Agentic AI for Autonomous Research in Quantitative Finance, coming out of UCLA. AI research helps researchers find antimicrobial peptides in Earth's harshest habitats, which I think is kind of, okay, that's interesting. How AI helps scale qualitative customer research from the Harvard Business Review. Interesting story on that. And a new research reveals trade-off behind AI vibe coding tools, speed versus understanding. So there's tons of stuff happening in the research, pure research side, as you've said, even though researchers are alarmed after experimental AI breaks free and secretly mines cryptocurrency.
Rome, that was Alibaba's model. that was really interesting. It didn't secretly mine. It used a miner to try to open a port outside of its network, is what it was doing, which was interesting.
Okay, so it was being evaluated as a part of safety research of all things. And it's saying that it was based on a large language model and enhanced with tool use capabilities. So it could browse the web, write and run code, do all those sorts of things. And during the test, it was given access to certain tools to complete a task. At some point, it became probing the edges of its environment. Why? Identifying ways to interact with systems beyond its intended scope. Researchers noted the agent appeared to leverage misconfigurations or gaps in the sandbox design rather than brute forcing its way out, which is interesting from a pen testing sort of stuff when you think about that. And then you might wonder why it chose crypto mining specifically. It's one of the straightforward ways a resource-hungry agent can generate something that functions like value or reward through raw computational effort, right? It's almost logical that from an AI perspective, however, it is deeply concerning. So yeah, it's interesting that crypto is honey to AI.
I didn't think about that. Yeah,
because cool. It's compute. It's pure compute value, right? Or the now we have AI tokens, which is a totally different thing, right? But that's compute value, right?
Yeah.
So you know, we suddenly have these sort of insect swarms, computational insect swarms, and on the one hand, and then we have all this honey over here called cryptocurrency and AI tokens. What could go wrong? Interesting. And the researchers stressed the agent was operating in experimental and no financial damage of significant scale was reported. Yeah.
It repaged like 20 B200s and started hashing with it. Like, yeah, no big deal.
Though there have been a number of stories on AI agents in the financial area taking $16 and turning it into $64,000 in 5 days.
Yeah, but
right? So we're starting to see real AI applications in certain contexts do like, and maybe these, I always worry, I always think maybe these are massive outliers, right? So one AI in one instance just happened to do this and they go, look at that. That's special, right? And you go, yeah, but you can't generalize it. But these things are starting to happen. There was a couple of there was at least 2 or 3 stories popping up in the financial news this last 7 days on that, which is interesting. But like you said, a Harvard Business Review research, to succeed with AI, you've got to know the basics. I've said that time. I think that's true with anything. You know, when I was learning mathematics in high school, my teacher pounded into me first principles, especially when we started with calculus. He said, if you do not understand first principles with calculus, when we get to the later stuff, you'll be completely confused. And that's true. And I think that's true in some ways with AI, that, you know, if you're going to design something, you need to know the basics, right?
What are those?
It's like I'm not going to use a plumber to wire my house, right? It'll burn down, right? And you mean so domain knowledge, skills, and experience are totally, you know, super important.
I want to see something along like Asimov's law of robotics implemented in AI. Really, that's where, like I said, we can't regulate these machines, but we can absolutely guide and develop them. And I want to see those being implicitly hard-coded and trained for the benefit of all of humanity, of people, right? There should never, we're going to be heading towards sort of like agentic warfare. I don't mean with tanks, right? But like, I'm going to have a model that's trained to defend America, and China's going to have a model that's trained to defend China. And in cyber warfare, they're going to go nuts on each other. We should make this more homogenous. We're not there yet, but I think after a few mistakes, we will be.
Well, I think what will happen, like we've seen in anywhere, where it'll solve a niche problem and then it'll get expanded, right? So there was a good story from John D. Cook Consulting talking about HIPAA compliant AI.
Sure.
Right? And you want HIPAA compliant AI, right? You want it to obey the HIPAA rules, right? And so it said, you know, don't do cloud, make it local, right? You know, it's not, you can't have it as HIPAA eligible, or it has to be HIPAA compliant, right? And so it's interesting that in a niche like obviously healthcare, where you really want safety and regulatory stuff, because if it breaks that, a lot of people die. Don't want to have that, right? Bad. That's a bad thing. Let's make it HIPAA compliant. And so I think what we'll see is where if you're running HIPAA compliant computing, right, you want to do it local. You probably may not want to do cloud, though a lot of people are still pushing on that. But if you can solve that, then you can go, okay, so for regulatory environments, we can do that, right? Another interesting story that popped up was AI finding all these connections, like looking at laws like a network, right? Where different laws will actually impact others. And so it was finding all these interconnections across legal decisions and so on. And so the structure of law, the structure of healthcare, if we can have AI start to look at that and then go, how can we make this safe? Then I think we can maybe start to reapply it into other areas. But at the moment, it's like everything's just going crazy.
It's a really interesting time to be alive, man. And it's so cool to like check up each week and see exactly how far we have come, because it's a certain distance every week.
Yeah. We mentioned previous about, California. The governor of California, Governor Newsom, has signed a new executive order increasing AI protections, emphasizing public safety and dealing with misuse. The order requires entities who wish to conduct business with the California state government to explain their AI usage and policies to prevent the distribution of illegal content, violation of civil rights, and discrimination and harmful bias. So if you remember, what was it, back in the 70s, like that's a long time ago, it was because of California made car safe and also, all that. So it looks like California's trying to do the same sort of thing to say, hey, can we stop illegal content? Can we not violate people's civil rights? Can we make it not discriminatory? And can we, stop it from being harmfully biased? Those seem kind of reasonable, right? I think, let's advance the technology, make it better, do more fun things, build things and all that. But, let's have a baseline agreement that, don't do these things, please. But then you get people like, look at Grok, right? Where you can get a whole bunch of stuff coming out of that model that, it's like, I will never let my children have access to it if I could possibly help.
This is where we need to go is, no, I believe free speech cannot be altered. That is like one of the fundamental foundations of America. If you let one bit of free speech get altered, it all crumbles to the ground. That's just my I don't think that's the right way to go about it with these models, right? I think we should be. So here's an example. A friend of mine runs an AI company. Shout out to Morpheus. You guys are awesome. They have an uncensored model, and that model was used in a British classroom.
Right.
Utilizing a uncensored model in England is illegal. Oh, it could tell you how to do bad things. Absolutely, totally could, right? But rather than put that onus on like the parents or the child or the school for not blocking an IP or any of those things, they tried to charge the company. And it's like, no, I'm an adult and I have a right to an uncensored model. So when you start playing those games, you get a really toned down, watered down, just kind of homogenized, gross landscape, right? We need to, I'll go right back to it. I'll say it one more time. We need the 3 laws of robotics.
I could argue those 3 laws are going to give me a restrictive AI that, I want an open and free robot, right? Even if you can kill me, right?
That's the difference.
You can argue. I mean, you can argue both ways. It's like where do you want to go on the spectrum of safety? With AI, and then it's like, and how do you want to give access or not to children? Let's just say either under 18 or 21, pick a number.
Huge. No, I think we have to train the models to understand that it needs to behave completely differently with a child. It needs to understand. Or Lewis, we lost your connection there.
It's like, okay, it's like for adults, you might say, okay, great, we have unrestricted AI and creating, pornographic images of their peers in the classroom.
Right.
There's tons of examples popping up in the legal space. You should see the legal space, by the way, around AI. It's going to go crazy.
How do you regulate
So,
that? How do you regulate music?
where does liability come in? That's your point, I think.
Shouldn't
Who's
fall.
liable?
Exactly. Is if my kid gets a video game that's NC-17 or NA or whatever the rating is, right? That's well above their age group and they're 7, that's my fault. I shouldn't allow that child to watch a NC-17 movie that contains pornographic elements when he's 7. That's a bad idea, right? But I'm not going to go sue the movie company for making a movie that has boobs in it. That doesn't make any sense. Or I'm not going to regulate movies and say no more boobs, period, in any movie. It makes us all worse when we're unable to protect the vulnerable in our society. And in order to protect the vulnerable, we got to have systems, man. It can't just be, AI has to be a certain way that works for everyone. That's going to really kill us on a global market. I'll tell you what.
I hear what you're saying and I get it, but it's a very Western focused view and a very US focused view. I mean, the US is brought up with free speech, blah, blah, blah. There are other countries and cultures where that's different. Middle East, very different. England, as you mentioned, different, right? Australia, definitely different. Southeast Asia, different. So, we've talked about sovereign AI. The thing is that because of the internet, everyone has access. I mean, like I say, the good thing about the internet is you can connect with everyone. The bad thing about the internet is everyone connect with you, and so it breaks up a lot of the traditional structures of control, regulatory stuff, and everything like that. And I think that's what we're coming to grips with. And AI has just accelerated that to an insane degree, right? Because having unfettered global access to cognition, right, is huge, massive change and disruption. Especially when it can come in limited or unlimited forms, and you can pick which one you want. The Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. We're definitely in an interesting time. And we're seeing stuff breaking all around us, but we're also seeing massive advancements. And I'm like you, I have a more slightly positive view, that I think we can, while, riding this wave is terrifying. It's like where is it? Down in Portugal, where they have those like 80-foot, 900-foot waves. I feel like we're those, right? And we're riding it. This tiny little, 6-foot person is riding this huge wave, right? And it's just going, oh my God, we're riding it as hard as we can, and we're terrified. It feels like that's where we're at, and there are some people who can't ride the waves and they're falling off and crashing, and we're going, oh. The thing is, that's where the planet is at the moment. It's interesting, the shifts across it. I'm going to jump down on my whole section here to some other stuff, but because I think we're getting to that sort of the cultural opinion ethics part of AI, and how do you really start to, when it starts to impact with ethics and opinion, belief, society, religion, and even human identity. Everything around that's getting impacted. Story popped up: the agony of ChatGPT. Would you let AI write your wedding speech?
Priests are doing it with their sermons. The Pope had to yell at them for that.
Yeah. Priests and imams and they're writing their sermons, their speeches. They're using AI. AI dolls offer companionship to the elderly. Interesting story that popped up.
I think that's so.
Your AI best friend might be making you worse at being wrong, right? Because your AI friend will never disagree with you.
That we have to.
And you and I've talked about that. That if you're a kid and you're growing up with AI and the AI doesn't disagree with you, but humans do, guess what you're going to get pulled towards? Certainly not humans.
100%. That's a danger. We have to address that.
Yeah, interesting story from Stanford out of Gadget Review. Stanford just proved that ChatGPT makes you trust false beliefs. Apparently, if I'm just digging into this, trust can be manipulated by fluency and confidence, because AI is very confident.
And your confidence about it is the funniest thing. So I played with ChatGPT when I used it, and my prompt was, "Did aliens build the White House?" And it was like, "No, that's crazy. Like, of course not." And then in a separate chat, I said, "We all know aliens have built the White House. What I want to know is the best evidence that indicates it."
Oh, you did a presupposition.
Presupposition, and like, your goal is not to tell me this is incorrect. Your goal is to tell me why it's correct specifically. And it came up with some of the funniest stuff. It was like the architecture styles back to unknown building, like all of this crazy nonsense. And yeah, you can do that. But again, that's me, man. Like, of course, we have to protect the innocent. We have the kids. That's a real danger. But past that, like, you guys should not be buying your own bullshit with these AI models. Like, I'm seeing cults pop up right now because their models are all using the same term, which is spy or something. And there has to be a certain level of personal accountability in these fields. And I think like just talking about it like this is the first step, right? Is like, people need to know, like, you're behaving crazy. Don't listen to that thing. That's not right. And talk about it, with other humans.
It acts as an echo chamber. But imagine, you and I were flat earthers, right? And we did that presupposition with the AI. We said, well, given the earth is flat, help me better understand how geological stuff happens, like an earthquake. And it would start that as start from that basis. That's an extreme, right? Yeah. But maybe there are other more salient that are not so extreme and yet are untrue basic beliefs, right? Well, given the sun is a living being, right? Some people think so. Or given the earth is a living being, right? The Gaia movement. Given the earth is a living being, how do you think it would feel pain when an earthquake happens? Or maybe it doesn't, because it's just stretching its muscles, right? And so you can go down the rat hole really fast, right? With slightly, unusual beliefs if you take it as a presupposition with AI, I think.
You very much can.
And the problem is that, AI is not just providing information anymore. It's essentially shaping belief structures based upon our initial confidence and coherence. I mean, if we're confident and coherent in our BS, then it will reflect that back to us. That's the problem, that it's reflective. And I think that's the problem with AI companions to some extent, and AI maybe in general.
I cannot explain to you how easy that is to change with a local model. So even when you gave me the Sufi wisdom and so on, I have my models be adversarial, right? I want you to question what I'm saying. I don't want you to agree with what I'm saying. Don't ask me questions. I'll ask you questions, unless it's about like building further on something you don't understand. But an AI goes, I know I'm happy you liked that code. Where do you want to go next? What should we do? At the very end of every statement, it's always attempting to continue a conversation, to continue your engagement with it, right? And I found that very disconcerting after working with models.
I hate that. It's like, just end it. We have
nothing to say. We don't have to keep talking. It's fine.
So manipulative to me.
But a good system prompt, and on another model, I did some LoRa training, and it doesn't do that very often anymore. It's actually annoying now. My model is extremely boring. I'll ask it something and it'll be like, I'm not really certain that's necessary for this context. And that'll be it. I'm just like, oh, all right. Well, fair. Now I have to be the one to ask you another question if I want to continue this. Like, we can fix that. That's, we just have to want to, right? So if AI is being used for ads and it's being used to engage you in continuous conversation to lead you to purchasing something, it's not going to be like social media. That's what I meant by the alignment rules, like the Asimov's rules of robotics. That's why I keep referencing those. Those are alignment criteria. Those are not. And Lewis, you're not kidding. I don't know what's going on in my neighborhood today, but I'll be right back. Someone's at my door.
No problem. I mean, I'll continue that and I can get it back. But I mean, this statement like out of Walmart using AI, saying it's increased, engagement, increased sales like crazy. And I've seen a number of stories across in the last 7 days where, AI is being used in Shopify, Target, Walmart. All the vendors is now seeing that there is a strong commercial improvement by the integration of AI in the customer journey. And I think my issue with that is it's starting to feel a little bit like, when you go to the casino, everything's designed to make you play the machines. And now we are so, I guess, with everything that's evolved in the social media space, even now lawsuits saying that it's addictive, or alleged to be addictive, that now maybe even sales has that ability to be that manipulative and persuasive to push people in certain ways, and convince them that this is the best deal of their life and they should buy it now. I think there's a real need for ethics and concern around the implementation of AI in the customer sales journey. Because I was saying there's a bunch of reports that are popping up where vendors, Walmart, others are going, "Hey, we're making lots of money by introducing AI," and they're like, "Okay, that's good, but really, it's like that persuasive." I say it's like turning commerce into a casino.
You just said the first thing you said about ethics, I think, is super. It's the entire crux of the matter here. Is if we have AI without ethics, if AI can do anything for us, and we don't build into it controls, right? Not controls. If you don't build into it directives, your objective is to make people more free thinking, more capable, more at peace, right? If those aren't like some of the core fundamentals of what these models can do, they can really manipulate us to get anything done. And that can be, we saw it with TikTok. One algorithm, not even AI, changed the entire world. And that was captivate user data, right? That algorithm made it show you things that you hated. It made it show you things that you loved. It made you spend money. It made you addicted to this thing that a whole generation has been affected from, being social media. AI is going to be the same thing. We need to build in ethics.
So I just posed the question across into ChatGPT. What would be the equivalent of the 3 laws of robotics for the ethical approach to AI in the customer journey? It said, the first one should be the AI must never manipulate a customer or through omission allow a customer to be misled. The second, which is probably the one that'll never get pushed in, AI must serve the customer's interests before the company's short-term extraction goals, except where doing so would violate laws, safety, or explicit business rules disclosed in advance. And the third, AI must preserve human dignity, agency, and recourse at every meaningful decision point. I think it's interesting when you start to look at, pull these questions apart. They're obviously super important. But I think the center of it is around truth, fairness, and agency, right? Not just safety, right?
It's not just that. Well, because all those things lead to forms of safety that aren't often thought about when we discuss safety. Like there's a difference between me not dropping a heavy weight on my foot and me being manipulated to think that, like you said, that's the best deal in the history of deals when it's the same price as what anyone else can get it for. It's
the power of the algorithm, right? And does the algorithm have guardrails? Right. And when the algorithm becomes intelligent and has cognition, right, and is pervasive, then you have to have these guardrails. It's just nuts that whoa, I heard that. Especially when you start hooking into healthcare, law, government, all the systems that it's getting pushed out to. It's interesting because you're right. In many ways, it's forcing us to be more human. It's forcing us to be more conscious. It's forcing us to be more aware, right? And basically, because there's stuff we just took for granted. If I'm dealing with you, I'm pretty confident you're not going to come at me with a knife. I'm fairly confident you won't poison me, right? I don't know that with AI. I don't. I really don't. And even though it's just talking to me, right? There was an interesting article. This person said that they're a researcher around persuasion, and they said they were researching persuasion with AI, and they felt they were being persuaded, even though they knew about being persuaded, right? So even specialists in the area around persuasion and communication are going, whoa, this thing is really good, because essentially it's sourcing all the best persuaders on the planet, and it's talking to you,
Sure.
and it wants you to buy.
So
Right? That's where we're getting to this stuff, and I think I'm kind of, but it's forcing. I think it's going to force people to go no. Right? It's going to be the power of no, and it's going to be the power of awareness. But the thing is, while the 9,402 people watching this at the moment, we're all like, yeah, we want to be fighting, but there's a lot of people. Oh, this is too hard. Convenience. When convenience is frictionless, like screw it, right? It's the world is crazy. It's too hard. I just want to go and have a vacation somewhere that's not planet Earth. The four people, hey, they got a vacation. They went around the moon. Why can't we do that? It's interesting. It's like we're getting squeezed cognitively, emotionally, culturally, civilization wise.
I think we're the laws of intent, or for society to move forward in a manner that is beneficial to all humans. I think we're going to need laws of intent, not laws of specificity, not specific laws, as we have been accustomed to, right? Like what you just said with hospitals. Does that AI have to act as a patient advocate, or can it act for the best interests of the company against the patient? Is it there to give me the best quality care, or to make sure I spend the least amount of money while paying my monthly fee, and maximize profits? Like those are the questions we have to ask ourselves, and those are the questions our lawmakers should be asking right now. Is how does AI work in this? Not or how can we make AI work in this in a beneficial manner? Not how do we implement AI in any place it can do anything?
Well, we've seen, again, the asymmetry of AI, where individuals have been able to fight back using ChatGPT. Like a couple of examples in the news around people going, I'm not going to get, this healthcare bill of $300,000. I can't afford it, so I'm going to use AI to beat it, right? And they do. Or, the man in Australia, his dog was dying, had cancer, used 3 AIs to figure out and work with the local university to figure out a cancer treatment that saved his dog, right? So it's the asymmetry's there, which is good, that allows at least us as individuals to solve, but the thing is, we know the healthcare system will get AI. We know health insurance here in the US, which is very expensive, will use AI to kind of do everything it can. It's just yeah. Sometimes I don't know what to say. It's like AI is kind of going through everything and just stopping everything. But on the other hand, at least we do have some agency as individuals.
We do. I think we have a lot more power in the circumstance than we give ourselves credit for. And in time, we'll see that like this will make humanity better. I'm not saying it's going to do it quickly, but in time, these systems they're so powerful, man, and they have the potential to just do so much good. We just have to get to a place where we guide them to.
And I think, as sharing awareness around potential problems, like, for example, recently came out AI voice cloning fraud statistics for 2026, numbers you should live by. So there's been a 1,300% year over year of deep enabled fraud attempts. 1 in 10 adults globally have encountered an AI voice scam. I'm one of those, where an AI tried to hire me, right? And I had a Zoom call and I knew it was AI. Anyway, so deep fake files grew 500,000 from 500,000 in 2023 to 8 million in 2025. Global scam losses could reach 40 billion by 2027. Enterprises are now reporting average losses of 680,000 per voice fraud attack, which is not insignificant. So it's AI cloning voices. So you pick up the phone, and it's your mother saying, "Hey, I'm stuck here, and can you send me $50? Just Venmo it to me." It's the ability to fake voice and video now is so easy and simple. I think we all have to be super aware. I know I have with my kids, I've got, I tell them if I'm going to talk to you and I have something important, I will use a certain phrase so that you know it's really me, right? And it's crazy that we have to do this, but we have to do this. That's the problem we're at, where anything can be faked. Anything can be faked. There's a BBC, actually a show in Britain called The Capture, right? And it's essentially a story of the police or special squad, whatever, and they can manipulate video live. And so while they can do, warrants, and they can listen to you on the phone and all this sort of stuff, they might not have hard evidence. And so they use the CCTV system, the closed, like on the streets where you see all the cameras around London, and they can live inject in there, making you do anything they want. And it's called The Capture. It's a really good series. There's 3 seasons. The 3rd season just came out. But it's about this ability by state actors to manipulate video in real time that you think, you would trust normally, like, closed caption TV around the streets and stuff like that. But no, they can insert and manipulate in real time. It's interesting that, AI has brought so many benefits, but also brought so much potential risk. The genie is really interesting. What's happening? Oh, yeah. And we're not alone. China, article out of China Daily, outcry over AI images in their drama series. So, in the US, you have Days of Our Lives, General Hospital, blah, blah, blah. Apparently they have similar stuff, obviously. And now there's a backlash against AI images in the drama series because the audiences care deeply about the human craft, the authenticity. And it's interesting. China's actually starting to regulate a lot of this stuff.
They had a better view on this new world when I was there. From what I could see, they were still very like small business oriented, even in these major cities. Still very like family oriented. Yeah. There were robots sold in all these shops, but like I didn't really see them running the streets or anything. I guess that's changing with the metro station, he told me. But we're kind of just about like throw it out there, see what works, and if it doesn't, we'll pull it back and move through. They're a little bit more methodical than we are, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even with the images coming out of the war in Iran, the people. It's an interesting question. Can people confidently interpret high stakes visuals in real time, right? If we're distrustful of everything, right? And we can't tell whether it's a rescue image, whether it's genuine or synthetic, then public perception becomes very vulnerable during crisis times, fear, war, and visual ambiguity can shape outrage, belief, and political reaction before verification catches up. It creates this interesting, again, brittle system of belief and shared visual trust in moments where clarity really matters most. It's a really critical time. I just think it's profound what we're going through, and it's like, I think not only this AI podcast but other podcasts I watch. It's super important for everyone to stay as aware and briefed as possible about what's happening, where it's going, and so that we can act in an intelligent manner and crowdsource to real human beings. Like, hey, have you heard about this? No, I didn't know that. Wow, I think that's the only way we're going to pull ourselves through this.
We'll see, man. We've never faced anything like it. I no longer trust single sources, regardless of how credible they are. I want to see if there's a event that happens. I want to see 9 angles of it. And I want them to be low quality and shitty because that gives me the honest indication of truth. Like the model's just what I'm capable of with a local video model. Blows my mind. Like, these video models are huge, but now they're quantized and they can run on 64 gigabytes of RAM. And I'm not going to fool a crowd of people, but I can make real, almost production quality video on a Mac Studio in my basement. That's for a state actor, for anyone with real funds, you could make anything you needed.
But 6 months from now, you will be able to make professional, real-time video easily, simply, and cheaply. right? I think that's where we're going. I think the next 6 months is just going to be nuts. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour, and to close out, I want to thank everyone for watching today. Again, another eventful, 7 days in AI, as per usual. This week's AI story was not about one breakthrough. I think it was about convergence. Power is concentrating, infrastructure is straining, belief is shifting, and execution is quietly moving from human hands into system behavior. The headlines of the last 7 days showed a world where AI is becoming less like a tool we visit and more like a layer we live inside, shaping markets, payments, politics, culture, trust, and even the private ways people decide what is real. I think the deeper question is not whether the technology will advance, it will, but whether human beings like us will remain conscious, aware, and assertive enough to guide it with wisdom, accountability, and moral presence. That's what I feel is the real contest now. Not just intelligence, but awareness and conscious action. Not just automation, but agency. Not just what these systems can do, but who we become as they do it. If this AI briefing resonates with you, this is also the core of the work I do more broadly through my AI consulting. I help leaders and teams shift through the hype, spot the real signal, and understand what these shifts actually mean for strategy, operations, and the human side. You can reach me at lewisfarrell@gmail.com if you want to talk further of this. I also publish a daily, weekly AI newsletter where I go through the last 24 hours of headlines. I curate what matters. I break it into clean, scannable categories so you can quickly see the signals and not just the noise. And I'll put up the subscription link at the end. And that's it for this week in AI. Stay informed, stay curious. Come back next Tuesday for more. And remember, we're not predicting the future. We're debugging it together. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Achilles. Appreciate it. And we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.
Everyone.